Okay, so let us continue the discussion on the topic of nature of supply. In the last class, I have discussed with you Section 7 of the IGST Act and Section 8 of the IGST Act. Section 7 of the IGST Act deals with interstate supply, and Section 8 of the IGST Act deals with intrastate supply. So whether a supply is interstate or intrastate, because until and unless I know which is the nature of supply or what is the nature of supply, how can I compute the taxes? It's not possible. How do I know whether IGST will be charged or CGST plus state oblique UT GST will be charged? How do I know this? So it is necessary to know whether the supply is interstate or intrastate. Through section 7, I will get to know the supply if interstate, and through section 8, I will get to know of supply if intrastate. But we have one more section, section 9 also. Supplies in territorial waters, because when any supply is happening on land, then I know the area, I know the state from which supply is being happened. But what if the supply is happening from Arabian Sea? What if the supply is happening from Bay of Bengal? What if the supply is happening from Indian Ocean? How do I get to know those supplies? Whether those are interstate or intrastate? When the supply is happening in territorial waters, how will you decide whether the supply is interstate or intrastate? And if you do not forget, or if you have not forgotten, that whether the supply is intrastate or interstate, I check two things: location of supplier and place of supply. It's clear. In case of location of supplier and place of supply, in case these two are within the same state or UT, it is intrastate. When these are different, whether two different states, two different union territories, or one state and one union territory, then the supply becomes interstate. So these two things are necessary: location of supplier and place of supply. And now I will tell you what section 9 tells me. But before this, you must know this point. Okay, what you must know. If you remember what we did, section 7 and section 8 of IGST. 7 was discussing interstate supplies and 8 was discussing intrastate. In both the cases, if location of supplier plus place of supply were required, location of supplier plus place of supply. If these are in different states oblique UTs, it was interstate. If these are same state or UT, it is interstate. Now, what happens when supply happens in territorial waters? For example, it's Kerala, Tamil Nadu, okay, West Bengal, Odisha, okay, and this is the Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean. Now, what happens if the supply is happening from this area? For example, ship is there. This is the ship, and these are some goods. And supply happens when the goods are on the ship. Maybe the person whose goods were there on the ship, he has transferred the ownership of those goods to any other party. Though the goods have not yet reached the port, reached at the land, still the goods are transferred. Technically, supply is happening. Had the goods been transferred when they were at this port, Tamil Nadu, there would have been no issue. Tamil Nadu becomes the state. Kerala becomes the state if the goods are supplied here. Odisha becomes the state if the goods are supplied here. West Bengal becomes the state if the goods are supplied here. But when the goods are supplied here, how do you know which state? So that is where section 10(9) says that whether you want to check location of supplier or you want to check place of supply. So what should be the location of supplier and what should be the place of supply? Government says, or not government, Act says, if the supply is happening in territorial water, then check the nearest baseline. So if this is the goods, then this is the nearest baseline, Odisha or this. For example, this distance is 10 nautical mile and this distance is 11 nautical mile. So which is nearer? This 10 nautical mile. So Odisha becomes the location of supplier if you need location of supplier. If you want to check place of supply, then again Odisha becomes the place of supply. This is what the point is. I hope the concept is clear. So whether you want to check whether any supply is interstate or intrastate, you need location of supplier and place of supply. So whether you need both these two things, location of supply and place of supply, or you need one, whatever is the case, section 9 simply says that check the nearest baseline, and in the coastal state in which that nearest baseline falls, that state becomes the location of supplier or that state becomes the place of supply. Let me show you section 9 so that you know the language of the act. Let me show you section 9. Section 9, yes, section 9. This is section 9. Supplies in territorial water, notwithstanding anything contained in this act. Whenever supply happens in territorial water, ignore all other sections, only follow section 9. Closing, where the location of the supplier is in the territorial water, then location of such supplier, or where the place of supply is in the territorial water, the place of supply. So in case you want to check the location of supplier, then location of supplier shall be deemed to be in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of the appropriate baseline is located. Similarly, where the place of supply is in the territorial water, the place of supply will be deemed to be in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest appropriate baseline is located. That's it. This provision simply tells you that whether you need place of supply or location of supplier, whenever this supply is happening in territorial water, check the nearest baseline, and in whichever state the nearest baseline falls, that becomes the place of supply as well as the location of supply. That's it. This is what section 9 is. In case this concept is clear, please raise your hand. Any doubt you can ask me in case the concept is not clear. So whenever supply is happening in territorial water, the location of supplier as well as the place of supply shall be deemed to be the nearest coastal state. That's it. But now I have not yet told you the meaning of territorial water. Do you actually know what is territorial water? Or what do you mean by territorial water? Can anyone tell me what do they mean by territorial water? Can anyone tell me what do you mean by territorial water? Anyone who can tell me what do they mean by territorial water?
Water which is within 12 nautical miles from the coast.
Yes. So how do you say that yes it is 12 nautical miles from the coast? How, on what basis you are saying it is 12 nautical miles? On what basis you are saying that yes it is 12 nautical miles? Any answer? 12 nautical mile is correct, but what is the source? How do you know that it is 12 nautical mile? For example, if you have to write it somewhere in your report, will you simply write it that territorial water is that which is 12 nautical mile, or you give the reference also on the basis of which you are saying that it is 12 nautical mile?
Is it section 15?
Section
15
15.
IGST Act.
15 IGST Act? No, I don't think so. Let me first see.
Sir, UN guidelines.
Which guideline of UN? Which guideline of UN? Let me check section 15. I don't think it is section 15. Section 15 doesn't say anything about territorial water. Section 15 doesn't say about territorial water, and as far as UN guidelines are concerned, which UN guidelines? Can I simply quote somewhere in any report if I have to answer that it is in UN guideline? Which UN guideline? Do you know this? No. So internet doesn't help always. You must know the authenticity, otherwise that your basis is not admissible, will not be admissible at higher level if you don't know the original base. Because just because someone says something, it doesn't mean that that is admissible. I must be sure about the concept, or I must be sure about those points which I am speaking. So let me first, before telling you the original source, let me first tell you different terms which will be used in territorial water. Now, if you have visited any coastal state or at any beach, you must find that there is a land. And gradually, when you go near to the sea, technically, what is happening? This is how the land, maybe after one point of time, is merged in the seas. So, you cannot see land after some point of time, you can see the water only. Okay, you can see the water only. Now this is the baseline, you can see. Here I can see the land and then water starts. But still below water, the same land must be continuing. Till 12 nautical miles. Now this area, till 12 nautical miles is my territorial waters. It is my territorial waters of India. Till 12 nautical miles, where I have all the rights. India has all the rights to do whatever India wants to do in this area, whether you call it as only for water or air. You can just have a straight line, and in airspace as well as in water space, I have all the rights. Then from the nearest baseline to the next, to the 24 nautical miles, starting from this till this point. Can you tell me till this 24 nautical mile, what is this? Which zone is this? This is contiguous zone. Contiguous zone of India. It is including first 12 nautical miles. Okay, it includes first 12 nautical miles also. So it is beyond territorial waters as well as adjacent to territorial water. It includes first 12, of course. In this zone, what I can do as a nation, what I can do, I can protect, I can take any step for the security of my nation, security of India. Sanitation, etc. Sanitation, fiscal measures, economical, political interest. Nation has a right, India has a right. For first 12 nautical mile, of course, I can take any decision without any condition. But beyond 12 nautical mile, though contiguous zone is till 24, but first 12 I can do anything. In next 12 I cannot do everything. I can do only these things. I can take the steps which are for the security of nation and for sanitation, fiscal conditions, etc., economical interest, etc. And from the baseline till 200 kilometer. What is this? Till 200 kilometer is what? Exclusive economic zone. Till 200 kilometer is what? Till 200 nautical miles. Sorry, I should not use the word kilometers. I should use the word nautical miles. If I say kilometer, kindly treat it as nautical miles. It is my exclusive economic zone. In this, what I can do? I can take steps for scientific research. Every nation has this right. I can have my own, or I can preserve my natural resources. Every nation can do this. I can build artificial islands. This is what the benefit is. And beyond 200 nautical miles, there is a high sea where the property is, or the sea is the planet's property. No nation has any fixed right. Now this is high sea. Beyond 200 kilometers, it is known as high seas. It is high seas, where every nation is having equal right. So what equal rights you can say? In this area, what right I have? Free navigation. The ships can freely navigate. Free airspace. Planes can navigate. And subject to some limitation because of less space I am writing here. Now these two are without any condition and some are with conditions, with some common conditions, and those things are what? Shipping and fishing freedom with condition. Fishing is allowed but some condition. Laying cables, okay, pipelines, cables with some conditions, pipelines, cables, etc. Now, how I am defining this? Because we have our Indian territorial waters, continental shelf, economic zone, and other maritime zones of India Act 1976. So, how, on what basis I am saying this? We have the territorial waters, continental shelf, except the other maritime economic zone, other maritime zones of India Act 1976. On this basis, I am saying this. This is the original source. So if I have to present a report, I have to give this source. I cannot simply say that I know this, it is 12 nautical mile. No. I have to present the source also. On what basis you are saying this? Because only then authenticity can be checked. And that is why in the courts, what is happening in media, whatever is happening with the gossips of some people, courts do not treat those as admissible. Courts always say for what? Do you file the affidavit. Why they are saying that you file the affidavit? So that it's clear that you are now saying this. And you cannot, tomorrow you say that I have not said this. That is why courts always say that file the affidavit. Or courts always work on the basis of evidences, not on the basis of what you believe is true. You have to present the evidence. So let me share with you this act and then let me show you the definition of these three. So make a habit that when you speak something, speak with sources rather than without any concrete evidence. This is this Territorial Water Act. This is my Indian Act of 1976, and on this basis I am defining those provisions. It is clearly visible. It is the Territorial Waters Continental Shelf Exclusive Economic Zone and Other Maritime Zones Act 1976. And then let me show you the definitions now. Section 3, Section 2 of this Act defines territorial waters. So you can see here, the limit of territorial waters is the line, every point of which is at a distance of 12 nautical miles from the nearest point of the appropriate basin. This is my first definition. Territorial waters, you can call it as territorial waters or territorial waters of India, one and the same thing. Similarly, Section 5 of this Act defines contiguous zone. And what it says, the contiguous zone of India, hereinafter referred to as the contiguous zone, is an area beyond and adjacent. Adjacent means going by side, beyond means over and above. Beyond and adjacent to the territorial waters, and the limit of the contiguous zone is the line, every point of which is at a distance of 24 nautical miles from the nearest point of the baseline, referred to in subsection 2 of section 3. Already I have covered 3.2, which was for territorial water, and this is for contiguous zone. And similarly, section 7 deals with what? Exclusive economic zone, subsection 1. Exclusive economic zone of India, hereinafter referred to as the exclusive economic zone, is an area beyond and adjacent to the territorial waters. The limit of such zone is 200 nautical miles from baseline referred to in subsection 2 of section 3. This is one thing. Now, high sea is not defined in Indian Act because high sea is not the purview of a nation. So yes, for high sea and all for these definitions also, exclusive economic zone, contiguous zone, and territorial water, the base is United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, because 70% of the planet is made of only oceans. So all nations had to come together to make sure that disputes are minimized when the ships or anything happens in the air. So what are these definitions are? Exclusive economic zone, contiguous zone and territorial water. This is based on United Nations conventions on the law of the sea. High sea is totally on the basis of United Nations conventions on the law of the sea. So where is the original source? So let me share with you the website of the United Nations, and then I will show you the original source. So always you must know the original sources. I hope you can see this. I think the screen is visible. United Nations. Let us check United Nations. This is the website of United Nations. And how I will check different convention. So if you are interested in international law, the study of international law in future, you must be having the knowledge of United Nations conventions. There are so many conventions: child rights, exploitation, human rights, relief, etc. Now this is, I hope the font size is visible. So I will click what we do. What we do. When I click what we do, here I will go at uphold international law. And when I go at uphold international law, these are different international law practices. This is United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So when you go at United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, there are so many different documents. United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Again, you click it, and there are so many components. These are different 6 official languages of the United Nations. Okay, Arabic, Chinese, etc. So let us click English. This is this convention. On this, the law of the sea prevails. And here I can check high seas. So high seas. This is high sea. Let you can see first 2 lines of this highlighted text. The provisions of this part. So this part is of high sea, apply to all parts of the sea that are not included in the exclusive economic zone. That's it. That is why I say beyond 200 nautical mile, because till 200 nautical mile it is exclusive economic zone. Beyond 200 nautical miles it is high sea. And if you start reading it after this highlighted text, that are not, second line, included in the exclusive economic zone, in the territorial sea, or in the internal waters of a state. Can you tell me what do they mean by state? Can anyone tell me what is the meaning of this state? I am reading United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Can you tell me what do you mean by this state? Any answer? Any answer? What do you mean by these states? It is Indian state, because when you are in India, and then if you say state, it means Chennai, Kerala, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, West Bengal, Gujarat, Haryana, Punjab. But when you break the boundaries of a nation, when you talk about as a planet, when you talk as a planet as a whole, then nations are known as states, like United States of America. It's a state, nation state, Indian state. So these are states. Russia, state. So when you are reading the documents of United Nations, the state means nation. When you are reading within India, the state means different states which are in India. I hope the concept is clear. So you don't simply go by the word state, you have to read always the real meaning of that state. It can be, state can represent entire nation, or state can represent only a portion of the entire nation. It depends. So when I'm reading the United Nations Convention, the state is not a state of Haryana, Punjab, etc. It's nation state. Nation states means Indian. India is a state for the United Nations. Please raise your hand if now you know the concept of this high sea and 3 other concepts: territorial waters, contiguous zone, and exclusive economic zone. Please raise your hand if you got the concept. Okay. Now, my purpose is to make sure that for the purpose of my GST laws, I am concerned only with first 12 kilometers. That's it. For our purpose, for the purpose of GST laws, I am concerned with these 12 nautical miles. Or in fact, this area. You can say this area. I am concerned with this area. 12 nautical miles. So that is relevant for GST laws. Because when ships are moving here and there, no government can charge the indirect taxes. They can move. Ships are free to move. Okay. So this is 12 nautical miles. So the entire issue of section 9 is for this 12 nautical miles. That's it. Now with this, the topic nature of supply is over. So this act and then United Nations Convention on the laws of the sea. Now with this, the concept nature of supply is over. So I'm starting a new concept now. So nature of supply means whether inter or intra. When you easily know now what is inter and intra, then you will ask another question from you. That what is the forms of supply or what are the forms of supply? I know the nature, but within this, you must know the forms. So there are 4 different forms of supply. So what are those 4 different forms? Outward supply, inward supply, continuous supply of goods, and continuous supply of services. I hope the screen is visible clearly. In case not visible, only then inform, otherwise I am assuming that you can see this. Now, in case of continuous supply, I have to separately mention the definition of goods and services. But when you say outward supply or inward supply, this definition will apply whether you supply goods, so it's common definition, or services. Similarly, for inward also, when you supply goods or services, there is no problem. It's common. But for continuous supply of goods, continuous supply cannot be written. Either you should explain whether it is continuous supply of goods or continuous supply of services. So we have to take the help of now CGST. Now I am ignoring IGST and I am again going to back my CGST definition. Section 2 clause 83 defines it. Section 2 clause 67 defines it. Section 2 clause 32 defines it. And section 2 clause 33 defines it. Now what is outward supply? So let me show you these sections now. This is my 283, as you can see, outward supply. Outward supply in relation to a taxable person, now it is a new word, taxable person, means supply of goods or services or both. I hope the screen is visible. Whether by sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal of any other mode. Already I have covered this sentence. Do you remember where we have covered this line? Do you remember where we have covered it? When I was discussing with you the meaning of supply or scope of supply in section 7 subsection 1 clause A, where that was the first category of supply, when everything is for a consideration in the course of business by any of such modes, sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal or any other mode, then it's a supply. I've discussed this in section 7 subsection 1 clause, so it's a repetition. Made or agreed to be made by such person in the course or furtherance of business. Now it is my outward supply. So can you notice something? This supply is only for a taxable person. Now that is another case who is a taxable person, but for the time being you simply note down this word taxable person. I can be a person, like just because section 2 clause 83, clause 84 says person includes. Now as an individual, for example, I have this laptop and if I sell this laptop, I am not registered under GST laws. As a lecturer, suppose I am selling this laptop. It is not an outward supply for me, because I might be a person, or not might be, I am a person, but I am not a taxable person. I will tell you later on about this taxable person, but I am not a taxable person. For the time being you know this, you must remember this point, that I am not a taxable person. I am a person but not a taxable person. So even though I am selling this laptop, it's not an outward supply for me. Outward supply can only happen when you are a taxable person. Supplying any goods or services, consideration is not necessary. What is necessary is it is a part of your business, or what you must be supplying is you must not be supplying in the personal capacity, but you must be supplying in the course or furtherance of business. That's it. This is outward supply. So technically, for simplicity, I can say that it's nothing but sale of goods or services, supply of goods or services in the course or furtherance of business. The only thing which is necessary is you must be a taxable person. And when you come to inward supply, section 2 clause 67, you will find there is a difference. Inward in simple sense is purchase. Now what is the difference? Inward supply. Inward supply in relation to a person. Now they are not using the word taxable person. So inward supply, in case of inward supply, you must be a person only and not a taxable person, not necessarily be a taxable person. Shall mean receipt of goods or services or both, whether by purchase, acquisition or any other means, with or without consideration, same thing otherwise. Now two things are different. In outward supply, you are a seller. In inward supply, you are a purchaser. Then in outward supply, you must be a taxable person. In inward supply, you should not necessarily be a taxable person. You must be a person, that's it. Now in outward supply also, consideration is not necessary. Inward supply, consideration is not necessary. For example, I got this laptop free from my friend. It's inward supply for me. Because in outward supply, business is necessary. In inward supply, even business is not necessary. Even if you are receiving something in your personal capacity, technically it's an inward supply for you. So is the difference clear between outward and inward? In outward, you must be a taxable person. It's your sale. In inward, you should only be a person, and it's your purchase. In outward, this supply must be happening in the course of business. In inward, supply may not necessarily be in the course of business, because when you receive something, technically it's an inward supply for you. That's it. Please raise your hand if the concept of outward and inward, and these two differences are clear. Taxable person, only person in the course of business, and business is not necessary. That's it. These are the two main differences between outward and inward. Please raise your hand if the definition is clear. If not clear, kindly unmute and ask me. See, make a habit of reading the original sources if you really want to get good score, not only for the purpose of this BCom examination. My purpose is basically to make sure that you can read the law at any stage of your life. So be comfortable in reading the original sources. That will only help, not the marks only for the purpose of this graduation. Now, outward and inward supply, these two things are clear. Now, let me come to the continuous supply. Like if you have a gas connection at your home, where the PNG, piped natural gas is coming at your home from IGL, Indraprasth Gas Limited, it's a continuous supply of service. Getting Airtel broadband at your home, Tata Sky at your home, it's a continuous supply. It's not one-time supply. Continuous supply, you are paying the amount and the services are provided. So this is continuous supply. Now why why the Act has defined these differently? Because there are different provisions which will apply, and it depends which supply is this. Is it an outward supply? Is it a continuous supply, etc., etc. So it's necessary to learn these definitions. Now let me show you the definition of continuous supply of goods, section 2, clause 32. What is continuous supply of goods? I hope it is visible. Can you see section 2, clause 32? I hope you can see. In case you cannot see, please tell me. Otherwise, I am assuming that section 2, clause 32 is visible to you. Now, this is continuous supply. And let me please read it only till this highlighted text, what it says. Continuous supply of goods means a supply of goods which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on recurrent basis. That means it's not one-time supply, it's regular. Under a contract, whether or not. Now it does not matter whether this continuous supply is by means of a wire, cable, pipeline or other conduit. So it can be without wire, like through satellite also. When I'm getting the services, it's a continuous supply. Or when you are getting the goods, it's a continuous supply. And for which the supplier invoices the recipient on a regular or periodic basis. That's it. So what is a continuous supply of goods? Which is provided to you continuously or on regular basis under a contract. It does not matter whether it is provided by way of any tangible asset or by intangible asset. It doesn't matter. But it is necessary that supplier is giving you regular bills, invoices. That's it. It's a continuous supply of goods. Apart from this definition, now this act is applicable to the entire nation, and the nation is big. India is a big country. It's possible that this provision, there might be some supplies which will not meet this criteria, but still prima facie those supplies are looking like a continuous supply. Because when you frame any one law for the entire nation, there are chances that everyone is not covered or everyone doesn't fit in that one definition. So that is why government says that these are the conditions of continuous supply of goods. But in case we think that, or we found that, in case we find that any supply of goods is happening which might not be satisfying this criteria, but in our view the nature is continuous supply of goods, so we can notify anytime any supply by name as a continuous supply. That is why the next highlighted text simply says includes. That means continuous supply of goods includes supply of such goods as the government may, subject to such conditions as it may by notification specify. So this first portion is defining continuous supply, and another portion simply says any supply of goods government can notify any time to be a continuous supply of goods. That's it. This is what continuous supply of goods is. The last is continuous supply of services, section 2, clause 33. Continuous supply of services means a supply of service which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on recurrent basis under a contract. Now these two lines are same. Then there is a difference. For a period exceeding 3 months with periodic payment obligation. In last case, what was necessary? That supplier invoices the recipient on a regular basis. In this case, it is possible that supplier invoices the recipient only once. Bill सिर्फ एक ही बार issue होगा, but It is necessary in case of service that the contract period is beyond 3 months and invoice may be single. But maybe in the contract it is agreed that for every month you will pay 5 lakh rupees, that's it. This contract talks about regular payment obligation. This contract talks about regular payment obligations. Invoice may be one, doesn't matter. There is no need to issue the invoice periodically. But payment of amount is received periodically, this is sure. And the contract must be of a period which is exceeding 3 months. If it is less than 3 months, then we cannot call it as continuous supply. It's beyond 3 months period. And in this case also, any supply of service which government thinks fit later on, they can notify that supply also as a supply of service which has to be treated as continuous supply of services. I hope the concepts are clear. If yes, please raise your hand. I have discussed with you 4 forms of supply. I have discussed with you 4 forms of supply and you have to learn these definitions. If not learn, you have to make yourself understand about the concepts of these 4 definitions, because we will use gradually later on. Outward supply. I told you that if any supply has become a supply, it simply doesn't mean that GST is applicable. No, it's not the condition. Supply is only the first stair. For example, if these are different stairs, before charging GST, supply is the first stair only. Then gradually you have to satisfy other criteria also to make sure GST is applicable. So first you should make everything as a supply, not by force but by concept. Then I will tell you later on where I will start using these concepts. But for the time being, you have to understand that there are 4 different forms of supply: outward, inward, continuous supply of goods, continuous supply of services. Now the next concept is types of supply. So I am proceeding step by step. First I have covered supply. Then I have covered nature of supply. First I covered supply, then nature, then forms, and now types. So what are the types of supply? So there are 5 different types of supply. Taxable supply, non-taxable supply, exempt supply, zero rated supply, and composite and mixed supply. Taxable, non-taxable, exempt, zero rated, and composite and mixed supply. So this concept, now this is the 3rd stage, types. I will tell you this in the next class. That's all from my side. Goodbye.